Hey, welcome to another episode of the Overcoming Adversity podcast. I'm your host, Michael Allison. Today's guest is a good friend of mine, Brittany Petty. She's a mental health therapist. Hey, Brittany, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you here, Brittany. So, I want to dive into this because you have a fascinating story, and I think it's going to be very intriguing for our audience to actually hear your story because we're talking about your profession and some things that affected in your life that led you to this profession into mental health space. So, I'm glad you're here.
Yes. Well, I'm just excited to be here. And it's just amazing how like we make these plans for our life, right? And we
Right.
want or we expect to be this. And God has a different plan for our life. And as we go through that journey, we realize like don't fight those oppositions and those hurdles. Just keep going. And so I would have never dreamed of being a counselor. Matter of fact, growing up, I didn't even have any interaction with counselors, really.
Right, 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 right.
Minus saying, "Oh, where are you going to college?" or "What are you doing?" And you're just like, "Okay, you know, I guess I'll go here," or "This is where I'm thinking about." I know I have the top GPA, so I have some choices. But outside of that, I would have never even looked into counseling.
So what even like brought you on the personal journey of even like saying I want to get into counseling, I want to get into mental health and start helping people?
Everything was a one journey after the next. So really, literally, my childhood was, I dealt with a lot of mental and physical abuse, and
Mhm.
then from there, I always thought I wanted to be, in radio, TV, film. I was always like, my friends would ask me, I'd be like, I'm going to be the news reporter that's like, today we have a tragedy and, doing all this stuff. And once I got into college, they were like, yeah, you're not going to make much money doing that. So I enough. And really, truly, when I look back at that, I was like, you know what? Don't let people talk you out of your dreams because,
Mhm.
I always dreamed of being a news reporter. But I realized, on this journey of, being an educator, which pushed me to realize like my first day in the classroom, I had a student, walk in because, when I was going through the training, I worked in corporate America, I transitioned to education. And my first day, they told me I was going to be a facilitator. I didn't know what this
Mhm.
was. A young man walked in, got on the desk, pulled his shirt up, was like, "Woo!" And I'm like, "Sit down." Like, and at that age, I was only, what, like 24, 25. So they was looking at me like, "Girl, be quiet."
Uh-huh.
And it was just really like that's when the light bulb came up. I was like, I need to be able to help people outside of just being a teacher. And no one is just being a teacher because you do so many different things. You wear so many hats. But it was then that I was like, okay, let me look into school counseling because what can I do outside of the classroom to help? But then I realized school counseling, you're not counseling. And really, it was in that moment of I'm literally finding out about what can I do next. And that's when I found out about mental health. And then COVID happened. And
Mm.
then I realized mental health became a really big thing. On top of, at that time, I was also doing lashes. So I was always doing something, right? Because I was like, okay, I got to pay for the license. I got to pay for getting
Right,
those
right.
hours this week. And I got to do this and I got to do that. And it was like in that moment, people would come to me and they're laying on my table, and I didn't even realize I was being a counselor then.
Right, right.
Listen, almost like the hair beautician that knows all the secrets. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
her, people like, help me. How do I help this teenager? And I'm like, here, I'm dealing with different struggles myself. Or, how do I, deal with this relationship hurdle? Or how do I deal with raising, my children? And so it's like, I'm helping them through those processes. But then I realized that, in your life journey, God's preparing you for those things. Because I have
Yeah.
this big phrase that I always say, like, no one wants to listen to someone who's never been through anything. And so I didn't realize saying that statement meant I had to go through a lot of things, but people are listening because of life experiences. And,
Yeah.
being honest with you, being in this journey of mental health, there are some things that clients come to me about that I'm like, if only they knew. I am dealing with that myself. And you begin to feel like you have to be
Yeah,
qualified to speak these things, but
yeah.
really, people just want you to be honest, be authentic with them, and help them through the trenches. And that's what I've learned, that it's not about being perfect. And I feel like, your childhood might have made you feel like you have to be perfect. Like, if you make a mistake, it's all over. But it's really not, because people
Mhm.
want to see that side of you and know that they can relate to you and know you and trust you.
So speaking of relatable, I truly believe and agree with you. And I know that you have your own personal journey and your own personal story in a way that at 25 years old, you're up here facilitating and teaching the classroom, but you had some things in your life that probably made you mature pretty fast and stuff like that, where that made you pretty relatable. If you can, I guess, give us a little snippet in regards to like where you're from, some of the things that may have occurred to you in your life that now resonates when you speaking with your clients and things like that, where they're like, oh wow, she's been through some stuff, and then she's totally qualified to help me get through some of these things that I'm going through right now.
So many things pop into my mind, but well, I'm from Texas. I grew up in
Mhm.
Cedar Hill, Texas, and you reminded me of when I first stepped on the scene as a teacher, because they told me straight up, they was like, I was teaching in the hood. They was like, you don't look like you from anywhere around here. Like, we don't want to hear what you have to say. We
Mhm.
don't care about math and whatever. And I realized in that moment that I had to sit down and have a conversation with them. And I was like, look, like, my grandparents grew up not too far from here. Like, I
Mhm.
am familiar with this area. But as I go throughout life, I realized that sometimes we need to remove that shield, because
Mhm.
sometimes we think that we have to talk proper, or we have to be this person who's not us, when you're talking to different people, corporate America, and different things like that, because we think that we need to fit in this box. But the reality of it is being yourself. And that's one thing that I've realized. So, how people say I'm not for everybody. And I've learned to realize that it's okay, because sometimes you really do want to be liked by everybody, but
Right.
you're not going to be. And that is okay, to be yourself. And I've realized, being on this business journey, is that if I am myself, I will attract the clients that can deal with me. Because if I put on this persona, and I'm super proper, but then behind closed doors, I'm literally like chilled and relaxed, they're gonna be like, I'm gonna be like, no, we're not made for each other, because
Right.
you are
Right.
strictly, and I'm not gonna always go by the book. And so, sometimes I'm gonna go with the flow, and that's okay. That's who I am, and just realizing that you don't have to try to fit in and be that person for everybody. And so that is something that's really helped me, and really understanding, letting my guard down to really be myself, and realizing that there is no perfect person.
Mhm.
Everybody is dealing with their own things, their own hurdles. And I just realized that sometimes we're around people who are always looking for something. They're looking for that criticism, or looking to be judgmental, but really, it's because they haven't accepted themselves. So
Yeah.
that's what it comes down to.
For the listeners that's listening right now, and if you could go back to where you were at when you were trying to manage college, work,
Mm.
being a mom, and all of those things, because I know that some of our listeners are in that space right now. What were some strategies that you implemented into your life so you could just learn how to balance these things, figure things out, and navigate life when you were going through this at a very young age?
Well, honestly, right now, I would just be honest with you. Like that, when I look back, I said I couldn't have did it without God. I couldn't
Mm,
have did any of this without God, because it is hard. You sometimes, when you're balancing all those things, you don't even know who you can even trust, or who you can. Sometimes we just need to vent, and if we vent to the wrong person, they'll be like, they'll use it against you, or say that, oh, she was complaining. And I wasn't complaining. I just needed to vent. This is heavy. So,
right.
going to work, going to school, going to college. Actually, I got married at 24. So I was young. I was pregnant with my second child. I was going to school, working, and that became a lot. And at one point, I remember, like, once I graduated from college, I'm calling the registrar's office. I'm like, hey, I haven't got my degree yet in the mail, because this job is waiting on me to turn it in to show that
Uh-huh.
I actually graduated. And they're like telling me, oh, it's coming. So I keep checking back, and I'm like, I haven't gotten it yet. And so finally somebody was like, well, let me check and see, what's going on, because those had been shipped out like a month ago. Well, come to find out, there's 3 GPAs they look at. So I majored in business. So you have your business GPA, and then it's like one overall GPA, and then there was like another GPA too. Well, one of those GPAs, they were like, well, you need to retake a class. And I was like, I got this job that's waiting. I'm pregnant, just got married, and I'm with my second child. I've been calling. So it's like now to miss the deadline for the next classes, and I was like, you know what? Just do what you got to do. And so that taught me in that moment, I didn't know that was preparing me for life, that you're going to go through challenges, that things are going to happen. And we get upset because we have our mindset on the specific outcome, whether that's with marriage. Like I even talk to my clients, no one gets married expecting it to end. You get married, you're like, this is my forever.
Right.
And things happen. You change. You're not the same person. You were. That person changes. And then sometimes you get hit with that crossroad of what do I do? I know where I am destined to go. And you have to look at, your environment. Is that environment serving you? And same thing with workplaces. We work these jobs. We have so many things on our plate. And one thing we don't realize is that we invest so much time in these careers, but what about our loved ones? What about our children? What about, family or those that mean the most to us? Because a job, you get sick or whatever, they will replace you just like that. I mean, I literally seen it with my own eyes. This person passed away. A week later, that position was posted. And I'm like, wow, like just like that.
No
And
time to warn.
right. I'm like, dang. And I'm in my mind, I'm thinking like, do they even tell the other person that this position is posted because that person, passed away or anything? I'm like, dang, that's crazy. And I'm
And
reading
this
this
world goes
book.
on, man.
Yes, and I'm reading this book and he talks about that. He talks about like, imagine yourself being in a casket right now. What regrets do you have? And I was like, wow, that hit home because I have a lot. If I'm being honest, because I'm like in grind mode, and I realize that our kids ask us stuff, and we're like, baby, not right now, or just a minute, or you're in these sessions with your clients, and that's time that you could be enjoying life.
Right.
So it's like something has to give and take. You have to work, but you also have to do these things. And so, like I tell people, when you're going through things, you have to be rooted. And if you're not rooted, you are going to shake. You're going to fall. You got to have people that are there that are going to uplift you when times get hard. And you got to know who you're going to listen to, because we do need to seek wise counsel. But I think a lot of times now people go to social media. And so I've learned to take a step back from social media and get rid of the noise, so I can be like, God, please, what is it that I really need to do? And that's when you realize, like, if you're quiet and you're still, you can actually hear, like, go here, go read this, go do that. And you feel so much better because you're not taking on what people said. Because I also learned that when we do that, when things hit the fan, that person's like, oh, I don't know why you did that. Ain't nobody told you to do that. You are literally the one that told me to do it. But then you can't be mad at nobody but yourself, because you're like, you know what? I listened and I'm the one who did it. So I'm the one I got to take responsibility for it.
Responsibility. Absolutely. Let me ask you this, because he spoke about something that was very important that I think it's important for our listeners to understand. When it comes to that, like, inner healing, how important is that for someone's growth journey, especially when they're going through some tough times, they're feeling some struggles and things like that?
It's so important that I'm gonna be honest with you. When I started my business journey, when I shifted from teenagers to young adults to adult women, that I realized, because of my own life challenges and helping people in the mental health aspect, that it really comes down to that transformational healing. And that's why I started doing like self-care retreats, because you can't put a price on transformational healing. But also, so many people are bitter and they're holding on to things that people did to them years and years ago. And it really comes down to being able to heal. And like I tell my journey, like, I haven't always had the best relationship with, my own mom because of a lot of the things that I went through growing up. But I couldn't be the woman I am today had I not done the work and did that and realized, like, okay, a lot of those things were out of my control, but I had to do the work. And if I didn't do the work, I would be no good to even my clients because, I would be so triggered by everything that is being said to me or everything that's being done. And the reality of it is, it comes down to being healed. And so it's almost like now, being in this walk of life, forgiveness, people are like, I don't want to hear that. But it really does come down to forgiving, and it's not for us. And a lot of times we are expecting people to come back and apologize to us and this, that, and the other. And it's like we're stuck and they're good. And I always tell people it's no different from being in a relationship where it's supposed to be you don't let the sun go down while you're both mad, right? But if you're dealing with somebody that don't see it, don't care, and they gonna be sleeping, they over there, and you mad, what good is that? What good is that? And so it really does come down to understanding the importance of healing. Healing is for you. It is for you. It ain't for nobody else but you. And when you are healed, you are free. And you're able to enjoy life and be in the present moment. And that's the thing. When you're not healed, you're constantly thinking about the past. You're constantly just you get angry. And the thing about it is you're angry and they're good. So you're putting yourself in a prison here on earth where you can be free, but you're in a mental and a physical prison. And it also leads to sicknesses and all kind of things. And so that is one thing we work through is how do we get past the hurt? How do we focus on what we need to do for ourselves so we can be the best version of us? So we can raise our kids and show up and be authentic and be ourselves.
I want to ask you this because I think it's so important for you to share your expertise on this. In this day and age, what are some of the common things that you're seeing people struggle with when it comes to mental health? And then what are some tips that you could share with our audience that could probably identify with some of the things that you're experiencing now as a therapist?
Well, I would definitely say, one of the things that I deal with a lot is anxiety, depression. A lot of people come to me for that work-life balance, but really people are stressed out. They're stressed. And when I go back to the anxiety piece, it's a lot of, losing control, not feeling like you know what the next steps are. Because some people, they need to know that, A squared plus B squared equals C squared, and they need to know when things are happening. And so when you feel like you are losing control, then that's where a lot of times that anxiety starts to build up. A lot of people are stressed out about, where they're going to get their next meal or what's going to happen next, or they are just taking on too much. And that's a lot. That's the reality, where we start working through those self-limiting beliefs, because a lot of that comes from us thinking that with these roles that you have to do all these things. And it don't even make sense. So when you really break it down, like, why does that make sense that you should go to work all these hours? Let's say you're a business owner, so you're working on your business. You got to take care of the kids. And you're just grinding. Like, you're not giving yourself any time. And so then when you can't move any further, because God's going to get your attention one way or another.
Most definitely.
You like, okay, what's going on? Because I've been there. I've been that person that was going. And I literally started feeling my body getting sick. And I was like doing too much. Or I'm going to the doctor. And I remember when I had my moment where, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I did not take heed. I had my moment. The doctor was like, you're doing too much. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, okay, I know you're saying that, this is what you do every day, but you're doing too much. You're going to kill yourself because you are doing too much. Like, you are taking on too many roles. Because at that time I was, school counselor. I was a mental health therapist, going through a lot of things personally. Like, there was two different completely big problems. But then, like I tell my children, I tell my clients now, I say this, I tell them all the time, if you're looking for problems, you're going to find them. But if you're looking for solutions, you're going to find them. And
You're gonna
so
find them
that's
too.
why you have to be willing to, okay, channel it and find the positive in what you're going through. So those are the main issues that people come to me for. I would definitely say the biggest thing for a mental health therapist from that aspect is you take on so much. So you got to remember to refill your cup. And that's the hard thing is remembering that, okay, yes, I have helped these clients today. I have taken on some of them, but I have to be able to release that before I go into my next role. And that means you have to be intentional with scheduling that time for yourself. And even for clients, I talk about that a lot, being intentional. And those are some of the things that you have to do. You have to be intentional about doing something for you. So whether that's reading a book, taking a walk, making sure you eat healthy, because if you don't feel your body, make sure you're eating every 4 hours or doing something for you, you're going to find yourself just drained. And a lot of times you find that people are, becoming really big people pleasers. They're doing so much for everybody, but then they leave themselves on the table to literally just, catch the crumbs, and that's not okay. And so, when you start to take those steps to say, you know what, I'm going to choose me first. You won't believe how many people, and you might, but they say they don't have time to read a book. And I'm like, you know what? I used to be that person, but if what everything I have on my plate, if I can find the time to read one or two books, actually read, it's even 1 to 2 pages a day, you're still further than you were the day before. And you get so much knowledge, even just saying 5 minutes. I'm gonna wake up earlier than the kids and read for 5 minutes. That knowledge that I have gotten has been
Mhm.
tremendous. I've read so many books this year alone by just making sure that I read, 5 to 10 minutes every single day.
I think that's so important when it comes down to self awareness, self your own like self journey in regards to like your own well being. I found that sometimes people struggle with saying no, and they find themselves often saying yes to more things that causes much more distraction and even take that them out of their own element. So I want to pick up on what you just said. When it comes to pouring into our own cups and taking care of ourselves and our own well being, can you talk about how important it is for one to have self awareness, but the self awareness that has an impact on yourself first, and like surrounding yourself with the right people, so you
Mm.
don't go out here and be a distraction in regards to like giving the wrong information, putting out bad vibes and stuff like that because your cup is empty.
Mm. I think I look at that two ways, because one way is that's where you get challenged, right?
Mhm.
That if you are out here because your cup is depleted, because usually what happens is you start, you have an attitude with people, you're going off, things are happening, but it takes that person to say, "Ooh, what's wrong with you? You're gonna have to, get that check."
Right,
Before
right.
you hear that enough times, then you start looking at yourself like, what is really going on?
Mhm.
Because the reality of it is, growing up, I never heard about what is a cup, right? Filling up your
Mhm.
cup, like, but you
I never
don't
heard
get
that either.
taught that. Right. You don't get talked about like that. And a
Yeah.
lot of time I think it comes down to like how you're raised. Like for me, I was the oldest. So having to take care of my siblings and do different things like that. We had a big age difference. And so you fall into that role of taking care of people and doing things. And then that kind of hurts you when you become an adult and you make these friendships and bonds and get in relationships because you're so used to, no one thought about you. Like, what do you
Mhm.
want? Like, nobody ever asked me, like, what shoes would you like or what would you like? Nobody ever asked me that. And so you get used to not being able to, take that stand for yourself and you just kind of go with the flow. But realizing like you do need to know yourself. There should be a gap from when you become a grown up to being able to, go off to college to really get to know yourself before you get into a relationship or get around people. And so I think it's really important to really get to know yourself, making sure that friends that align with your values, because what's going on is a lot of times people don't even know what they stand for. They don't know their values. And so they just kind of become friends with whoever's friends with them, or they like whoever likes them.
Mhm.
And then they realize, like, wait a minute, these are not, qualities or things that I stand for. Or some people might say, oh, well, that's fine. They can do what they want to do. That don't really affect me. But it really does, because this is somebody you're hanging with all the time. It's no different from, hey, if somebody's cursing every other word that come out their mouth, well, eventually you're going to start doing that, because y'all are too mingled to each
Most
other. Just
definitely.
like if
Most
they're
definitely.
listening to music all the time, you're going to start listening to that type as well. And so you really do have to take a stand, and who you have around you matters, because that can be the difference of you being successful or not, or you being a free person or being in jail, or
Mhm.
or not. I've heard so many people tell stories about how, they might have gotten laid off a job, or things happen in their life. And guess what? The people that were in their corner were the next ones to lead them to that next level. So because they're like, what do I do? And the friend's like, go do this. So you're like, okay. And so that's why it really matters who you have around you, but you have to kind of know what that is that you even want, and take the time to spend time with yourself. And so a lot of people are not taking that time to really date themselves. Like, what is it that you really like and enjoy doing?
I agree with you. I think doing some of those, so we might think it's small, but when just doing some of those things, you'll find that it's so rewarding on the inside for yourself, as it's like building up your own dopamine when you're taking care of yourself first. I found that that was the best healing for me, being a veteran, where I was struggling trying to like navigate all of these things when I transitioned out of the military. And then once I got a counselor working with someone just like yourself to help me identify areas that were not like my strong suits and areas that I needed to like work on and to be better at, that's where I started seeing like that transition or that transformation for myself, where now I could start pouring back into people and helping people because I was very depleted in some of those areas that I was lacking in.
Right.
Yeah.
You're right, because when you're depleted, you can't help anybody. You're no good to anybody,
Right.
It's
Right.
like putting a pot, like I use this analogy with a lot of my clients. It's like putting an empty pot on the stove that's turned on. Eventually, it's going to burn.
Don't burn
And
up.
you fill up the whole house. Like, because it's no other way.
I'm not gonna put myself out there. I probably burned up a couple pots of time or two.
Hey, you're not alone. You're not alone in that.
So let me ask you this as we get ready to wrap up here. So for the person that's out there that's listening, and they're saying, "Hey, I like what Brittany's talking about. Can you share with us maybe one or two clients that you've worked with that came to you a certain way, but have walked out of your doors, walked out of your service, or probably potentially still a client with you now, but you've seen the transformation within this person?"
Man, I would definitely say when I hosted my first self care retreat, it
Hmm.
was last year in Key West, Florida. And when I getting ready for that, I faced so much opposition from I was hit on all angles. And those are the moments when you're like, man, is this worth it? Because I'm going through a lot to put this together. And it was just like having that burning fire inside of you, right? It's like, I have
Hmm.
to get this done. Like, I know, yeah, I could just show up and see clients one on one all day and be good. But it was like there's something that God has placed on me that's so much bigger than me.
Hmm.
And so hosting this retreat, it was amazing. Like, the women walked away eating healthier. A lot of them were like, okay, I'm not going to eat meats. A
Hmm.
lot of them just sharing, opening up, sharing their stories. Like, one lady was like, I haven't shared this with anybody, just sharing things. And you could literally see the light on her, like the darkness just lift off of her. Like, she was smiling, she was happy, like in that space of being able to share. And it was just like, wow, getting to see it firsthand, the transformational healing that everybody walked away taking something away, whether they established better routines in their life, eating healthy, working out, going for walks, choosing to treat their bodies better than what they were doing before. And understanding it really is a wholeness where you have to walk and look at yourself mentally, physically, spiritually. And that was a really big transformation, and that I hold on to as I continue to plan, from the time they get there to the time they leave, because, there's so much more to life. But the biggest piece is you have to take the first step. And so each woman that came on this trip, I had some that were business owners, some that, they're working their careers, doing the thing. But they had to take a step away in order to get that help. And so a lot of people have asked me, why can't you just do it in the area? I could, but the reality of it is when things happen, you're going to think that you can just leave and go handle that, and you're not going to get the full event, or you might not even show up because you're like,
Right.
and so it forces people to get out of their environment. And that's where the transformation really took place, from so many levels. I would say working with my clients, seeing the transformation, we literally go through a step-by-step, process. Every client is different. But I can honestly say being able to walk through the journey with a lot of them to say, hey, like, this is how you started with me, and this is where you are. And I always
Mhm.
tell them, my job is to tear you down in a good way. Yeah, right. I gotta put that there. A good way. But then we rebuild your foundation, and understanding that your foundation looks different from somebody else's foundation. And so one thing about me is, like I tell people, one session a week is not gonna help you. Me talking to you 1 hour is the work that you do in between.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I have to have those real conversations. Like, look, you came 4 times and didn't do not one homework. Like, what do you really want?
Mm.
Like, and then they have to tell you, like, oh, you're right. Like, and it's like, no, you're wasting my time.
Mm.
But for those that say, okay, you know what, I am willing to do the homework and do these things in between, those are the ones that have the greatest result. And that's what brings me satisfaction of knowing that I'm working with people. And so they started off weekly, now they're every other week, and now they're monthly. But seeing when they come and say, hey, you said make a plan for my family so we can spend time together, and now we're actually doing that. My teen is enjoying this, or my younger one is this, or even my husband, he's actually happy about our check-ins. And I'm like, yes, we're keeping marriages, I'm keeping families together. And just though that's where I get the biggest light, of knowing that, okay, this is working because they are applying the
Mhm.
tools and things of that nature.
I bet that is the most rewarding part, knowing that, looking at where you're coming from, right? That I got into this profession, and now I'm seeing the journey of people kind of going through some of the same things I did myself, and you're seeing them cheering, you're seeing them happy, you're seeing them reunite, you're seeing them heal while they're on that journey. I also think another key thing that you kind of said was there's an identity shift, right? And now where they were at before in regards to how they saw themselves is now a different version of themselves
That's
as they
right.
went through your training and all those things that you're teaching them. So I love that about what you're doing. So as we get ready to wrap up here, I wanted to ask you to share with our listeners, understanding your transformation, your journey that you came from. What are some lessons, or what are some key takeaways from your life, or even some things that you've worked with and seen with some clients that you could leave with our audience?
Man, I have learned, in this group, and you reminded me of that in this group that I'm in, that, you know what? Sometimes we have the question, why me?
Hmm.
And we ask that. And you're entitled to ask that question. You are. But it's also equally important to understand that that means that God has a greater calling on your life.
Hmm.
Because I've met people who tell me they ain't been through nothing. And I'm like, dang, you ain't been through nothing? Like, and some people they have talked about, their biggest struggle is trying to figure out, what, coach wallet. And that was a real life scenario that I had. What coach wallet to get, and was going on and on and on. In my mind, I was like, that's your worry? Because there's so many people worried about a roof over their head, food to eat. They don't know, like, and so I've learned that, we have to embrace the punches. And so,
Hmm.
it's not about how many times we get knocked down, it's about how many times we get back up to rise to the occasion and doing the mind shift. And so I realized that everything that I have gone through was to prepare me for the next hurdle, for the next journey. And so, yes, when you're in it, it don't feel good at all. It hurts. It's a lot. It is. And so I learned that in order to get where we desire to be, that we have to be willing to go through those things. But also, God is going to do things in our life that pull us closer and closer to Him. So that way, when we do get the success and the fame, that we're not like people that's out here that don't have their soul tied or, centered on Christ. Because at the end of the day, like I heard this one lady say, you have to be willing to not slave yourself to the money. You have to be willing to make sure that you have a solid rooted stand. And if you have that solid rooted stand, then you're not gonna say, "Oh yeah, I'll do that for 40,000. I'll do that for 80," because you're gonna be okay with turning that down because that doesn't align with your values and your self worth. And as we come to a close, it makes me think about Chadwick Boseman, who said that when before getting his roles and things of that nature, he said a lot of times they would reach out to him and say, "Hey, would you like to take this role?" And it's about representing Black men in a bad light that are being abusive. And he said he made a vow to himself he didn't want those type of roles. And so because he turned those roles down, he was able to get, amazing roles that also led to the amazing Black Panther role. But had he said, "No, I'm going to take this role because I'm just trying to get my foot in the door," then he would not have been able to live up to the greatness that he has. And so one thing I've learned throughout my journey of life is to roll with the punches with a smile, and understanding that, good things come to an end, bad things, that bad season is going to come to an end. And it's all about the mindset, of being pruned for something greater. And when we take it with that, like the rose bush that has to get pruned in order to be greater, then we realize that we got to let go sometimes and know that God has greater in store for us. And so we would let go of what we see right now, then we can make more room for what God really has in store for us.
I agree with you. Thank you for that. Britteny, how can people find you, work with you, get you on their podcast, or purchase one of your books? Tell us all more about what you got going on.
All right. So if you would like to work with me, you can definitely go to focusyoursuccess.com. That's where you can get a copy of my book, Stop the Drama, Stop Comparing, Focus on You, as well as Listen Up and my next book that's getting ready to come out next year that's called Unapologetically Divorced. Just helping people to make the decision without having to have the weight and the constraints of society, but being able to do what's best for them, where you get rid of all the noise and focus on yourself. So go to focusyoursuccess.com. That is where you can get a copy of my book. If you want to work with me or anything like that, you can follow me on all social media platforms at empower_you_crown up. You can send me a message on there. You can comment on there. You can say, "Hey, I want to go to the retreats. I want to, take advantage," or you might say, "I just want to do counseling," and I can send you a link for all of that stuff. But you can follow me on social media at empower_you_crown up. And you can go to focusyoursuccess.com, and that's where you can get a copy of any of my books.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Britteny, it's been a pleasure to have you on as a guest. Thank you so much, my dear friend. I look forward to further more conversations with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Until the next time, guys, God bless.
Ain't it all? Couple dollars in my pocket, no income and go. Been working on my body, getting healthier.